And I'm Susan. Welcome to EduBofs,
where you will find tips for teachers and help for your students.
If you haven't already, you know what I'm going to say. Click that little red subscribe button and the bell next to it so you get notifications of new videos when they pop up.
Yes, and we're on all the socials.
All the socials, links in the description box, or just look up at EduBofs or at EduBoffins.
So, Suze, last week we were talking more about learning goals.
We were, and of course I was wigging out because I love learning goals. But I do like a learning goal.
Today we were thinking that maybe we would just run through how we make learning goals just part of our lesson routine so that they just happen.
That's right. If you haven't watched the videos leading up to this one on learning goals, I will put a link up here to the playlist, or you might already have found it in the playlist link nonetheless, and it would be great if you could watch those first because this one sort of wraps up mostly how we use learning goals.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So Suze, you have got a really set rhythm because you teach maths and you're not crazy like me with your learning goals. Do you want us to run us through the start of your lesson?
Absolutely. So I train my kids from day one, not only in my maths class, but in my science class and my history geography class as well, but mostly in my maths class. I greet them outside the door. I think I've mentioned this somewhere before.
Yeah.
Greet them outside the door. They walk in, sit down, books open, date, title, learning goals in their book immediately. Something that I've also added then is once they've done their learning goals, I might have a prime time task for them, which is usually about 5 to 6 questions to do with yesterday's learning goal. So they have to think back or look back through their books to find the lesson from before to answer those questions. And while they're doing that, I then take the roll. Once they've done that, I then go through the working out and the answering of those prime time questions. And then I start cold calling on kids and asking them, little Johnny, read the learning goal for us, please. And they've got to use big loud voice and they've got to read the learning goal. And then I'll say, all right, Chloe, can you tell us what the cognitive verb is for today? And we underline it. And then I go, all right, who can tell me what this cognitive verb means? What is it asking us to do? And I will get a kid to explain it, if someone else can add to it. And this process, depending on the learning goal and depending on the cognitive verb, can take anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes. So if it's a learning goal that uses the cognitive verb of solve or calculate, we spend far less time on it because they know those two back to front. But if it has something like express or explain, or some of the more complex learning, justify, some of the more complex cognitive verbs, we definitely spend a lot more time working on them.
Yeah. So with my seniors, I don't go into as much detail. Pretty much the same though. They come in, sit down, write down the learning goals, and again, if there are any of the tricky ones. For instance, I found that students often struggle with contrast and compare.
Or differentiate.
Or infer. So any of those, we'll have a bit of a discussion about it. But those learning goals go straight into their Cornell notes. And as the lesson progresses, I do ask them to refer back to yesterday's learning goals. So yesterday, what were we doing? What were the learning goals? Do you have any questions about that? And that happens in a discussion format. So that learning goals become the conversation in the class. This is what we need to learn. But you have to work at getting students to engage with the learning goals. It can become very mechanistic where they just come in and write them down and they don't even register what they've written down.
Absolutely.
So that discussion is really important. And it doesn't have to be long. It just has to happen at the start of each lesson. And honestly, by the time they reach year 11 or 12,
they should know their cognitive verbs by then.
And the discussion becomes less and less.
Absolutely.
Because they've learned how to use them.
And of course, different, like we mentioned in our previous video, different subjects use a different set of cognitive verbs. And those, they're very sort of like solve and calculate and all that. You're not going to use solve and calculate in history, but
I can't imagine that.
I couldn't imagine using it in history. No. You might use calculate in geography, maybe. And you might use it for science, for example, calculate the mechanical advantage, but your language arts cognitive verbs are going to link with your history and all of those, where your mathematical numeracy cognitive verbs are going to link more with your sciences.
Yeah. So that sets up the start of the lesson, getting those learning goals just regularly put in, really easy at the start of the lesson. I think it is also really important that you make it real, and I think you use that with your prime time activities. So making it real by actually using them in questions.
Yep, absolutely.
I should imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, I do the same. So I don't have, with the seniors, I don't have prime time activities, but we do have my cumulative check points, which are about 5 or 6 questions.
Yeah.
And all of those refer to previous learning goals from the day before, the week before, and the month before.
We do, in our junior classes, we do fortnight quizzes, and the fortnight quizzes all revolve around learning goals from the week or the fortnight leading up to them.
Yeah.
So often we will be teaching them something and then only really looking at it again in 2 weeks' time. As part of that retrieval practice as well, we let them know it's coming up and that they've got to hit those learning goals in those fortnight quizzes.
Yeah. All right, so then the teaching happens and the practice happens and the discussion groups happen and the activities happen. And then at the end of the lesson, 1 or 2 things can happen. You can dismiss your kids and they can just waft out, and the learning goal has been long forgotten because they've done so much actual learning in the class and they've forgotten where they were actually heading with that learning. Or they could be in Suze's class.
In which case, we do what we call a plenary. I have to admit, I did not know what a plenary was until this year. However, I have been using them for many years.
And I didn't know what it was until this afternoon.
That's right. So plenary is basically a closing. It's not just a closing of your lesson, but it's a closing of your lesson including your learning goal. So just reiterating the point of the lesson. So there you go. That's what a plenary is. So you might do something like what I do, and I've mentioned it so many times and I've been dying to tell you about this little plenary thing, is something that I call Fist of 5. So at the end of the lesson, the kids will be standing behind their desks and we will look at the learning goal if there's just one or many, and we go, okay, so for example today we had, I will be able to express mixed numbers as improper fractions. And so I'll go, all right, I'll read the learning goal out and I go, okay, go, Fist of 5. So fist means save me, I can't do this, I have no idea what you're talking about, you might as well be talking in Japanese. Okay, 5 means I've totally got this, I could teach the whole class how to do this, really. And anywhere in between is usually I need a bit more practice. So don't get it, I could teach it. This is a common one I get, I need some more practice. I need a bit more practice but not a huge amount, nearly there, and yeah, I've got to practice lots. But this is the one I don't ever want to see. And I don't see this very often. It's usually a 5 or a 3 if I have done my job properly in the classroom.
And if they've been listening.
And if they've been listening, which they better have been.
Yes.
Or else there's big trouble.
They're better. So that's basically like an acted out proficiency scale.
Absolutely. Yep. It's so you could do a proficiency scale where you could put it up on the whiteboard, like on the projector, numbers 1 to 4, where 4 is they're totally proficient and 1 is they still got no idea what's going on. But that requires a little bit of extra work on your part. Fist of 5 literally takes 30 seconds and you can see the entire class in front of you with their hands up and where they're at.
Yeah.
And usually the kids are pretty honest because they're too busy looking at you to see your reaction to them than to look at everyone else. Where if you were to do the proficiency scale on the board and they had to write it down and you'd have to go and check it and there's all this extra work. So that works really well. I mean, there's place for proficiency scales, but when it's just the end of a lesson and it's just quick, you need to know where they're at, who might need more help next lesson, etc. Fist of 5 is my go-to.
Yeah, I think it's really, really useful, especially with maths.
Yep.
And it is basically a proficiency scale. And I just had 2 thoughts while you were talking. This is not my Fist of 5. I got that one.
Yes. Excellent.
My two thoughts were, at this time of the year, Sue's been teaching this class for a long time. They've got to know her, they've got to trust her, so they're happy to wave their hands way high.
Yep.
But you could also do fist of 5 to the chest.
Yep. It's same as the thumbs up to the chest. That's a questioning strategy that we might look at a little bit later, because another thing I really enjoy is questioning.
Yeah, but it's very easy to say fist of 5 to the chest, in which case they keep it here so that nobody else can see exactly what they do.
That's right.
I also think that it is useful to link it to a small homework activity.
Absolutely.
I'm not a great fan of homework, to be honest.
No.
But I do feel, sometimes you don't have time to have that wrap-up activity, consolidation activity in the class, and you might need to have an exit ticket, which happens at home.
Yep.
In which case, a very simple proficiency scale can be useful to the students, so that they are actually having to measure when they're away from you whether they've achieved the goal.
And in which case, you probably just give them a little printed copy that you've you've kept in your folder for a little while, and just hand it out.
Yeah.
And good in their books.
Yeah. And just on that note, with proficiency scales, I've seen really complex ones and I've seen really simple ones, and a lot of schools, including my own, doesn't have a school-wide policy about proficiency scales, in which case less is more, because we are not a fan of overworking.
Well, that's it. And especially in junior, if it's too complex or there's too much there to read, they're not even going to bother reading it. They're just going to go, I'm a 4, I'm good. I think once you get to senior and they've got that language skill there, I think a more in-depth proficiency scale would work. But if you're just introducing it and the other teachers are not using it,
keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
You can basically keep your fist of 5 on paper form, attach it to some very small piece of homework that answers the learning goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when they come back the next day, they're going to get that reminder. So you've got this constant focus of, this is where we're going, this is where we've been, have I got this? The constant check, the constant retrieval practice. And it just builds into good, solid learning.
Absolutely.
Nothing fancy, just good, solid learning.
That's what I love about learning goals, is they're so simple, and they're such a small part of the of planning and the lesson, but they're still so important.
And you can literally take them straight out of the syllabi normally.
You can take it straight out of the standards, and honestly, if you just take one standard and you pull that apart and you pick it apart, you could end up with 5 or 6 learning goals for just one standard. It's all there for you. You just got to spend a little bit of extra time, being a bit more diligent about writing them, because students will do this well. It just doesn't fly. Sorry.
And it's certainly something that I wish I had known when I was going through school, because honestly, teaching has changed a lot, and I had some really good teachers, but there were some lessons that I had no clue where we were going.
That's right. And what is the point of teaching if the kids don't know where they're supposed to end up? They're never going to get there. You're expecting you push, but they're blindfolded. So.
And they should keep. They need to learn as well to keep coming back to that learning goal until they get to the 5.
That's right. That's right.
They shouldn't go, well, I'm here and that's okay.
If they're here, they should be doing a bit of extra practice.
Or asking some questions to clarify something or something like that. And all of that comes through developing relationship and trust and maturity.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that's about it.
I think it is. So if you have any questions or comments about learning goals, or you think there's something that we've missed, leave it in the comment section below and we will get back to you on that one.
We will. And we have got a big list of things that we're very excited about and we want to share with you.
It's longer than my arm, and my arm's not very long, but it's way longer than my arm.
It's huge. It's a very long list.
Yes.
But if there's anything in particular you would like us to have a look at or to talk about with you, let us know in those comments.
Absolutely. And of course, click that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.